Hey guys, my name is Nick, and today I'd like to come at you with a discussion on habits and patterns. Patterns and habits, and willpower and addiction, and just, you kind of get the idea. Um, I will be referring to nicotine and also a habit that I like to call blazing. And when you hear me refer to that, just assume, as you would be so correct to assume, that I am talking about smoking, and I'll leave it vague, but I'm definitely talking about smoking something that is completely legal federally and statewide across all U.S. territories. With that out of the way, this kind of thing is on my mind recently because I'm coming up on 15 months with no nicotine, and let's say a month into my current kick of quitting blazing. No air quotes needed. You get it. I've set up the premise. Um, yeah, it's a real big milestone in my life. I think it's a huge. I know that it's a huge factor in a lot of people's lives. Vaping is all the rage. My nicotine of choice was always not cigarettes. Vaping, of course, was something that I dabbled with plenty, but I never had so bad of a nicotine addiction as when I was using stuff like Zins and Ons when I got to wanting a stronger milligram strength of nicotine than Zins offer. Those were my vice, and I used them a lot. It's just like a punch of nicotine to the face. It's really easy to ramp up your use of those products from one strength to the next and the next. That's how it went with me, and at the end of my nicotine habit, I was using half a can of the On Citrus 8 milligram every day, half a can of it. I mean, we're talking like making yourself sick. It had to be. That's an incredible amount of nicotine every day. And yeah, I feel very reflective on how I've been able to quit these types of things, and it's not easy. It's not easy for anybody. And I have to preface and say that I can be a pretty gung ho, all in kind of person with these types of things. I can be very, I'm doing it all right now, all at once. I'm gonna stop. No training wheels, no weaning. I'm fucking done with it. And I won't ever come out here and tell you guys that you have to do what I do the way I've done it. It worked for me and it was a struggle, but I just hope that by sharing my experiences, you guys might be able to take away a couple of pointers, a couple of pieces of advice that work for you, and just some encouragement. I'm really lucky I haven't had worse addictions for longer in my life. I am at a point in my life where I actually am grateful for a lot of the things I have not done and mistakes I haven't made. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I no longer feel so bad on myself for the ones I have made. And for that reason, the fact that I have not been to the some deep dark places of addiction that I know other people have, people in my life have been to, that I can only dream of. But I'll speak my piece on what I know, and the places that I have been to with addiction and dependency and substances and even just behavioral stuff. So the last 5 years of my life, I've really tried out a lot of different things. I've moved state to state. I was a federal volunteer for a year and decided to live in a completely even separate state from my birth state after I got out of being a federal volunteer. And I have to say, my nicotine use really ramped up when I lived in fucking Mississippi. Any of you who know what Mississippi is like are probably not super surprised. I lived in Mississippi for about 6 months out of the year that I was a federal volunteer, and three to four of those months, I was really limited, just living on a government campus in Mississippi. Not always happy with the company that I had around me, and nicotine was really just at first sort of a boredom thing. Vaping and kind of having a cigar here and there was just something to do, something as kind of an emotional coping strategy, something just, I lived out in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi and didn't have a lot going on at the time, and I feel like that's the perfect conditions to pick up a habit like that. So that's what started it off for me, and I think that the mistake that a lot of people make, I know I made it at the time, I just mentioned it. Even then, at that point, it was an emotional coping strategy. I think people make the false assumption that you need to be addicted to something for it to be an emotional coping strategy. There's nothing wrong if you're someone who's able to have a cigarette here and there, pop a Zyn here and there, hit a vape here and there, and not need it, not have to have it around, not have it develop into a habit. But also, there is always a different choice and a better choice you can make, even when you're not a habitual user. So, yeah, I actually, funnily enough, only ramped up my usage of nicotine, um, you know, once I came back home to my home state from living in the South. I went through some hard times where I had, rent that was way, way more demanding of my financial resources than I would have liked. And living alone, paying most of your paycheck and your take home pay monthly in rent, not having a good support system, living in an area where you used to have a support system, but you no longer do have much of a support system. Those were the circumstances where I worsened my nicotine addiction and got to the point where I was doing, I think I mentioned, half a can of 8 milligram ons every day. It was pretty brutal. And there were a couple of half hearted attempts in there at quitting nicotine that didn't last more than 2 weeks because it was brutal at that point. I really, like, my bones wouldn't feel right. I would barely be able to drag myself out of bed. I would feel completely disoriented if I didn't start the day off with a strong kick of nicotine. And it wasn't until I sort of started making other improvements in my life. And it makes sense to me now why I wasn't able to really tackle that head on in a meaningful way until I improved my material conditions, you could say. I had to come to the conclusion in sort of a school of hard knocks type of way that I needed to obviously reduce my rent costs, but I needed to take that at the time what was a hit to my ego and pride and move in with a family member for a matter of months. And that alone was enough to make a night and day change. For me, I have a stubborn streak like that. I've been able to take care of myself all right, my entire adult life. But when I got to the point where debt was piling up and money wasn't being saved, money was just going out the door every month, I was bleeding it out the nose just to afford not even what I would call a modest living, but the bare bones of independent subsistence that wasn't. I just felt like I was spinning my wheels constantly. Make it didn't make me feel like I was achieving anything, and those those times in our life will come and go. There's nothing wrong with sticking it out in a situation like that, but there's also nothing wrong, I think, with setting aside your pride and setting aside the expectations that have been sort of drilled into us as far as the American dream, this hyper independence, this strike out on your own and do it yourself kind of a mentality. I still think that I have that, but I had to put it in check, and I understand now why it's okay to get some help and take a load off if you need to. Stop putting so much responsibility on yourself. Excuse me. All of the goddamn time. I moved in with a family member for a matter of 6 months, and in that time, I was able to wipe out credit card debt, another habit that started off very well meaningly when I lived in a state over from the state where I'm from and where all of my family lives. And that credit card debt was racked up coming to see people for the holidays, taking big, long road trips here and back just to, be back to where my support system really was. And the first step in taking a little better care of myself was moving back closer to my support system, but then I had to realize maybe I should lean on my support system while I've got the opportunity to, while I'm young and can more easily, reinvent what I'm doing with my life and how I operate. I was also able in that time, as soon as I moved in with this family member, able to pretty much immediately make the decision to cold turkey it on the nicotine. I think at the time I was still blazing moderately. I think it took a little while for me to decide to quit blazing. It was plenty good of a coping mechanism during that time, and I'm much more on and off with quitting blazing. It's one of those things. It can be, and certainly be, an emotional coping strategy as well. And I will not be the person to tell you that it can't be a dependency, that it can't be a harmful influence in somebody's life. But it can also be, as it was for me, a helpful tool at the time to quit something much more severe and much more impactful and harmful to my life, my physical health specifically. And, it's funny when I talk about the harms of nicotine, because one of the it just does crazy things to your brain when you quit a nicotine addiction and a habit that's so ingrained as a part of your well-being and daily life. One of the craziest impacts on my health that nicotine had was my mental health. In those couple of weeks following my cold turkey quitting of nicotine, I felt like I lost all my charisma. I lost my spontaneity. I lost my comedic timing. I lost or so I felt, like I lost my ability to interact smoothly in social settings. And I felt like I just had this little gremlin in the back of my mind telling me that that wasn't going to come back. That I was that person, but I could only express those qualities of myself that I like and that other people latch on to as hey, that's Nick, that's smart Nick, that's quirky, funny, quippy Nick. The little nicotine gremlin in the back of my mind wanted to stab me in the dopamine cortex, whatever part of my brain is most responsible for it, and that little gremlin wanted to tell me that the only way to get those things back was to go back to nicotine. It becomes that much of a pattern in your life, and really, people do think that they don't need it and they can quit it when they like, and it's true. You can quit it. but you really have to overhaul your emotional support, the ways you cope mentally, your daily habits, what makes you feel good and gives you a dopamine release. And certain people, certainly if you vape and have a cigarette habit, find it much more easy to cope with quitting with sort of an oral fixation type of replacement habit. Toothpicks, I did find hard candies to be quite helpful, but really I just had to deal with being a fucking lunatic for at least 2 weeks. And then I have a personal specialty apparently when it comes to quitting substances, which is I get these crazy fucking sinus infections. It happened at the 2 to 3 week mark after quitting nicotine. I had such a crazy sinus infection that I blew my nose so much that I proceeded to have this crazy, crazy nosebleed that just would not fucking stop one night. Right, I would say as the really severe cravings, the really worst, most severe nicotine cravings were starting to go. And once I came out the other end of this like week long sinus infection, I was pretty much good. I had pretty much wrapped up the hardest part. I still had to be vigilant, but I'll never forget that first week, the first couple of days, when I had decided to quit nicotine. For some reason, I decided to quit right before myself and the family member I was living with made a big several day road trip to see other family in a different part of the state. And I tell you, I was plotting the entire time. I was both stealing all of my resolve, stealing my willpower, and shoring up my mental defenses against the nicotine gremlin. And at the same time, in the a small part of the back of my mind was focused on plotting how I could sneak away and get some nicotine. At the time, this family member of mine, had no idea I was using nicotine and had ever had a nicotine addiction, let alone that I was going through these withdrawals. And every gas station stop, every place we stopped where I was able to roam free enough to go possibly make a nicotine purchase, I was heavily tempted to. And I certainly have always, during my attempts to quit nicotine, fallen into the trap where the nicotine gremlin tells me, "You're doing so good. Just give yourself a little treat. Just take a little break and go have a little something," and it's just completely counterintuitive. It's for that reason that weaning has never worked for me. I've never given it much of a try, but it's also never worked. It's just never been an appealing tact for me. I suppose I've never been so addicted to something, though, that I couldn't quit without weaning, is another way to look at it. And that's something I'm fortunate I've never had to experience, is that level of addiction. So, you might be asking at almost the 20-minute mark, what's the point? Well, the point is me sharing my experience with you, and hopefully it means something to you. I had a really hard time quitting nicotine, and I'm so thankful that I have done that. That kind of dependency just weighed me down. It always was in the back of my mind, as I think it is with most people with an addiction like that, as something that you want to get off of your back, but it's such an easy, quick way to get a little relaxation, a little zen. It was, for me, the type of nicotine as well that I could do during work, anytime really, during any setting, and no one would really be aware that I was doing it, and that's such a dangerous trap to fall into. Having this instant calming habit you can do that's a substance is really, really something that I think a lot of people get into and they don't realize how far they've fallen into a dependency with it until they're fully dependent, and quitting is going to be a bitch. So, I think I think my advice to you would be this. If I had to frame it as advice, I would tell you, anybody who wants to take the steps to get out of not even a substance abuse dependency, but a dependency on someone else, a dependency on someone else's emotions, someone else's opinions, maybe a dependency on food or anything. You know how much you can handle in terms of stress, and I think you know deep down what you need to change to enable yourself to make those changes. I had to stop being the can do it all myself all the time kind of guy to be able to raise my station up in the world a little bit, and having a healthier, less substance dependent baseline for my mental health and for my day-to-day operation is ironically what allows me to be that more self-sufficient person. No one person can do it all by themselves. I'm sure some of you have really incredible stories of not needing to, being able to work all these things out in tandem simultaneously. And I've done stuff like that before in my life. But you can't add infinite stress to your plate without changing and broadening the support structure that allows you to bear that stress. That's how you give yourself a mental breakdown. And it feels bad enough, feels close enough to having a mental breakdown when you're quitting a substance like this, or a habit, or a pattern. So, yeah, there is pretty much everything I think that I have to say to you guys regarding at least nicotine. Um, let's focus just for another minute or two more squarely on blazing, because blazing is widely viewed, and I think rightly so, as a much less serious, maybe impactful type of addiction than alcohol, or say dependency, than alcohol or nicotine. And I feel a lot less of a hard line, um, opposition to it in my own personal life. I like it. I enjoy it. Like I've said, I'm only a month off of my recent quitting attempt, and really just lowering tolerance for it and lowering daily use. Daily use for me of a substance like that just goes down the path of escalation and increasing. And I enjoy blazing. I really do. It can be a really good way to have fun every now and then, let loose alone or with friends, have a little break from being so serious. But at the same time, I will express that dependency is really the problem, and you don't have to be this what is so often labeled an addictive personality to have a dependence. I challenge people to look at themselves and question question the assumptions that you make about yourself and how prone you are to dependency. You might think you're the kind of person that can pick something up and then put it down before you develop a dependency on it, but I would challenge you to question why you felt the need to pick it up in the first place. no one's perfect, and I'm certainly not. And I can almost guarantee you that I'll enjoy blazing plenty more in my life. But I also try and take a look at myself and look at what I can replace that with, what I can do to have better coping mechanisms. Where if I want a spontaneous way to let loose and go have some fun, how can I do that even as a one off thing without just picking up a substance? Now, look, and I would be remiss to not sort of mention that I have a philosophy, as I described in my last video, that is very much optimistic nihilism, right? I am not a straight edge kind of guy, and I will never claim that I don't enjoy substances from time to time. But the point about it, Jesus Christ. Sorry. Uh, my phone is blowing up and I got completely distracted and sidelined. What was I getting at? Basically, it's a really good thing to analyze your own habits, your own ways of dealing with things emotionally. And I guess a lot of that talk sounds vague, right? Because I can't tell you what you should change, but I think that people know, and people, myself included, I say this because I've noticed this pattern in myself. People know what they need to change, and people know what they can do in place of picking up a substance or picking up the phone to text an ex because they still need attention or they still feel compelled to give somebody else attention. I know that I can just as easily, and I try to more and more all the time, pick up a book than anything else, even the phone, to scroll mindlessly for half an hour to an hour. Do I think you should beat yourself up for every one off incident? No. And do I think you should beat yourself up for being dependent on something? No way. Life is hard, and in the modern day where people just go through so much daily stress, there's so many ever oscillating complicated stressors that go through people's lives. I will never be the one to judge somebody else and tell them that they're a bad person or a weak person or that they lack willpower for falling victim to something like that. But at the same time, people people know what they can be doing instead of picking up a substance or a pattern that's unhealthy, an unhealthy habitual behavior. So I have to say that that's been my biggest way of changing these things in my own life is I love to read and I love to write as well. I've been more successful with picking up reading, and I've dabbled where I can with writing, and it doesn't all have to come at once, but you can piece by piece work these things in and have something to fall back on. And if you can't fall back on one thing, fall back on another thing. Every so very occasionally, I like to mess with watercolors myself. Just water painting with a cheap enough set of paints and brushes and a little sketch pad. If I can't make myself read or write, and I try not to make myself, I try to seize on the ambition and the inspiration when it strikes me, and if it doesn't strike me, I try to just get myself to water paint. And if I can't do that, um, something that I've really not picked up in a while but is always fun is whittling. Just take my small little leather strop and the kind of oil primer you put on it and sharpen my little uh woodworking knives and get to work on a cedar block. Anything to say that I've gotten my creative outlet for the day, which is my my main way of recharging, relaxing, and getting away from things that I know just aren't healthy for me. And will I always be successful in avoiding those things? Fuck no, I won't. I haven't been fully successful this week, this month, or even today. But every time I can say I replace a pattern of unhealthy behavior with, even if I just put a roadblock in it and replaced it with something else, well, there you go. It was good enough for me. And I've also tried to build up my self satisfaction skills, saying that I did enough today. I got rolling in the direction I was going towards, and there you go. I made some progress today, and progress doesn't always look linear. It almost always, I think, a successful progression sometimes feels very unsuccessful. Sometimes you dip back straight into that behavior. Sometimes line does not go up continuously towards where you're going. Sometimes it goes right the fuck back down to, or almost to, right back where you've been. And sometimes that's the most successful way of reinforcing your understanding of why you are so fucking sick of revisiting that place. Ultimately, I think that's the kind of habitual reinforcement that will one day keep you from going back to something you don't really want to go back to, and you know you very well shouldn't go back to. Okay, I think I've really gone on long enough to the point where I'm less of spitballing and just rambling, so hey, that was a video for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Please drop the suggestions down below. All interaction is welcome and very cherished. You guys, anyone who's watching and commenting, you're greatly appreciated. Start telling me what you want to see from me. You guys drop suggestions for me. I'll do an AMA, I'll do a Q&A. Give me ideas for streaming. As soon as I hit that 50 subs, I will be streaming to you guys as often as I have an appetite for it. You guys tell me what you want from me, and hey, maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't, but I will definitely see you again with many words, many ideas, many things to say. So until then, thanks you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later.